larger users of power think that they're going to be able to get a better rate because they're negotiating directly with suppliers. And quite frankly, since we shop such a huge volume of electricity, natural gas, we oftentimes have the ability to negotiate even better prices because of the bulk, if you will, of what it is we're shopping.
Hello, I'm John Zimmerman, and welcome to Shelf Confidence, a podcast brought to you by the Pennsylvania Food Merchants Association that focuses on the trends and innovations facing the food and beverage industry. Today, we're talking about something every operator depends on, but not everyone feels confident managing: energy. Joining us are Cheryl Heft and Jude Clemente from World Kinect. They work with food and beverage businesses across Pennsylvania to navigate energy sourcing, fuel strategy, and price risk. Today, they're here to help us better understand how energy decisions affect day-to-day operations and what businesses can do to manage cost and volatility more effectively. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I figure we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. I got a whole list of questions. I'm ready to get going with you guys. So for listeners who may not know about World Kinect, can you give us a quick overview of what you do and how you work with the food and beverage industry around Pennsylvania?
PFMA approached us back in 1999 and asked if we could partner with them. At that particular time, they were mostly interested in electricity and natural gas shopping. So since that time, we've been their exclusive endorsed energy consultant, and we offer now a very large portfolio as part of World Kinect with the energy shopping, of course, but we also offer sustainability, renewable energy sources, and then obviously we have fuel. Land, marine, and aviation fuel.
So I look at price. Our team looks at price risk, obviously, because and you nailed the word, John. It's volatility. I'll probably use that word 20 times during this conversation because that's really the problem, and that's a budget wrecker for companies and operators and whatever it may be. So I look at our position as sort of a broker in between the buyer and seller, and then what I do is look at risk price. So we look at how prices are changing, risk from energy policy, risk from things happening in the market. Now we're in winter, obviously getting out of winter, weather risk and things like that, and looking at hedging for different companies. And that could be an advantage, hedging, buying your gas or electricity before you actually need it, setting a price, because that can be eliminate some of the volatility that we talk about a lot.
I hear that volatility does seem to be the order of the day these days, it feels like a lot of the time. So, yeah, I'd love to take a step back, though, and understand, what got you guys into this industry in the first place? I'd love to know a little bit more about your guys' professional trajectory into this.
I'll go first on that. You'll probably see me raise my Steeler Cup 5 or 6 times during this conversation. Well, probably more than that. I'm in Pittsburgh, PA. I lived out in California for a long time. My wife's Mexican. I met my wife in Mexico. Right near Vallarta, by the way, Puerto Vallarta, which is having some narco, it's in the news right now.
All over the news.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been lived in different areas. I lived in Mexico for a while, but I went to Penn State. I'm a Penn State guy, so my dad was a professor there for 41 years. Frank Clemente, if anyone, one of your kids or you went to Penn State, you might know that name. He was there for a long time, teaching energy policy. In his early years, and then later on, he was just sort of teaching sociology, life lessons type stuff when he was on his way out of retirement. So he was an energy consultant for a very long time and actually worked on 3 Mile Island, the incident down in late 70s. My dad was actively involved in that, about the value of energy, why energy is good for societies, communities. And his job was to explain why nuclear power was good for a community, because in those days and still today, people are generally afraid of nuclear power. But if you look at the track record, it's pretty darn good. There have been some issues around the world, we know that, but that's kind of how. What's that?
A few.
Yeah. So that's how I kind of got into it, just because I grew up learning about natural gas and coal and oil as a kid, because he was a big consultant in the 80s and 90s, and then in the 2000s. And was a professor at Penn State for a very long time. So that's how I got in it after graduate school. I went to San Diego State and I was looking for a job, and my dad said, I have a lot of work, come work for me. So I worked with my dad for a long time, and I compare it to taking batting practice off Nolan Ryan or Roger Clemens. and then you go into the game and you realize that the pitcher you're facing in batting practice was a lot tougher than the people that you're facing in the game, the pitchers you're facing in the game. So I was fortunate to work with my dad for a long time.
That's a good problem to have, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. I did not know that about you. That's
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting information. I might have to bring that up at a future spot. For me, it was a lot simpler. I was working with a company that at that particular time, DREG was initially just coming off in PP&L, and they asked me if I would be willing to work with them to recruit, hire, train individuals for their existing book of business. And one thing led to another, and that particular company led me to On Demand, which then became acquired by World Kinect.
Hmm.
But I
Okay.
love this industry. I love this industry.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little of the backstory on that. No, I appreciate that. So circling back around to business here a little bit, I'd love to know a little bit more about what advantages does a consultant bring to this versus doing this work on your own?
There's a lot of misinformation or misconception, I guess would actually be a better word. Um, Oftentimes, we will find that larger users of power think that they're going to be able to get a better rate because they're negotiating directly with suppliers. And quite frankly, since we shop such a huge volume of electricity, natural gas, we oftentimes have the ability to negotiate even better prices because of the bulk, if you will, of what it is we're shopping. Um, that's only a small portion of the equation. Jude already alluded to this. Actually, both of you did, the volatility. We are one of the few consulting firms that subscribe to the Bloomberg terminal. So that gives us a very good picture of what's coming down the pipe for future electric. And that's important so that we can offer strategies to clients, prospects that may not have that information at their fingertips. This is what we do day in, day out. This is all we do.
Right. No, that's a good point, Cheryl. And I'll add to that. Yeah, the Bloomberg, the data we have access to is incredible, and the pay data, of course. But there is a free data system out there, and I'm not letting the cat out of the bag. The Department of Energy. So we're very fortunate in this country that we have the EIA, the DOE. The EIA is the statistical arm that puts out a bunch of stuff, and they've gotten a lot better, like putting out daily stuff, weekly stuff, not just what happened 2 months ago. They're putting out stuff out all the time. So we utilize that with some of the subscription sites that we use. And I do brag a lot about my particular team and our team in general, that we have great experience. And also my own price risk management team, we meet every single Monday to talk about recommendations in the market. And I can assure you, working at other outfits, which will go unnamed, they don't do that. And I worked at companies where they literally meet once a month, once a quarter. And we meet every week to see the changes in the market. And natural gas and power are changing. We saw this with Winter Storm Fern. Things are changing so rapidly that's a huge advantage, and no one does that in our industry. And like I said, the data that we have access to, I've actually seen information or webinars of companies putting out webinars for their clients, and the data they use is from like 3 months ago or even a year ago. I have seen that. You will never see that with us. We have up-to-date information, what's happening now. And I do think some of our competition, I don't want to use the word lazy, but they do use data that's out of date. And in this energy field, you need, in the field in general, you need stuff that's happening, what the price is today, what it was yesterday, where we think it's going. And the other advantage we have is we do come at this mostly apolitical, which is hard to do. We don't like to alienate clients and people listening on who you're voting for, who you're not voting for. We come at it as a very realistic approach to pricing. And both sides of the aisle, I will say, I think we all know, have problems on their energy policy. But generally speaking, we do offer a lot that our competition does not, I would argue.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back around though. You had mentioned before about the about misconceptions, and I kind of want to pull that thread a little bit more. What are some of those misconceptions that people might have? And I'd love to go a little bit further and just ask, like, what are some of the surprises in general that people learn about energy pricing?
Well, besides price, a lot of it has to do with contract language.
Okay.
Oftentimes, individuals that are negotiating on their own, they think that they're negotiating theoretically a 6 cent price on electric, let's say, regardless of what public utility you're in across the state. Oftentimes, when they get their bill and they calculate everything out, they come to see that they're paying 8, 9, possibly even 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And I would have to say the number one concern that I see are individuals that really may not have in-depth understanding of contract language. And that's one thing we really keep our thumb on the pulse of. We have suppliers that have changed their contract language 3 times since the beginning of this year.
Hmm.
So we have to read it every time that we're looking at a contract that's in front of us. So I would say that would be the largest one. They feel that the price is the price, and it may not necessarily be their bottom line price.
Gotcha. Anything to add, Jude?
Sure. I believe this, and I mention this a lot on some of my client calls. So I give client calls, updating clients. I share my screen, my computer screen, give them pricing, different stuff in the news that they might be seeing, certain recommendations that we might have for their particular market in a particular part of the country, their particular facility, whether it's in Washington, Florida, California, Texas, Pennsylvania, wherever your facility is, we know what's going on in that market around that facility. One of the huge conceptions that I see, John and Cheryl, in my opinion, is this idea that these companies want very high prices. They make more money when, oil's $100, natural gas is $8, electricity is $100 a megawatt hour, whatever it may be. Certainly on oil and gas, and we do have oil clients because they use heating oil that comes from crude oil, obviously. So that's a big deal in our industry. I think there's this push out there that we're looking for a fair price. So when you think about natural gas, $3.50, $4, $4.50, somewhere in that range, $3 even certain times a year, that's a fair price for consumers, producers, where both can win, where producers can make money. It's a decent price for a consumer. When you get these really high prices, they get a lot of political heat. And this is a midterm election. So the last thing these oil companies want is $100 oil, $7, $8 natural gas. It not only incentivizes alternatives. What's the best thing for an electric car is if, gasoline is $7. It's going to make an electric car. Yes, they want to make money, but they also want you to use their product. So they don't want you to say, hey, I'm not going to use that product. I'm not going to buy from that supplier, whatever, because that price is too high. And I think, and they're also a lot of times they're market takers, so they're price takers. The market the price is set on a market. When you go into Apple and buy a new computer, they're effectively setting that price. I know there's different parts of the computer that they can't control, but oil, for instance, is set on a global market because it's the global commodity along with coffee. So they don't just make the price of these products. A lot of times it's something that, a price, they're looking for a fair price. And I think that gets forgotten a lot. They're not trying to rip you off and make a ton of money by price gouging you. I think that is a misconception in the industry.
Well, shifting gears a little bit, AI is top of mind. It's hitting up all kinds of headlines. People are talking about it all the time. I wanted to kind of ask you guys a little bit about that. So what can we expect with all the electric changes coming out of AI, coming out because of AI? And what other future factors should we be aware of regarding that?
AI means more electricity. That's inevitable. These data centers are using more electricity. Lots of time they're going to be relying on the grid, okay? But a lot of the time they're going to be relying on their own generation, what's called behind the meter generation, stuff that they're building on site of their facility, okay? And there was just an article literally 4 days ago in Politico about Governor Shapiro talking about if you want to come into the PJM, our footprint, Pennsylvania, he's been pushing back, you have to bring your own generation. And even the power monitor, market monitor for PJM has said that. If you want to come into the PJM, you have to bring your own generation. And this is something that I think is going to be a little more controllable when you look at the new power demand that's coming for AI. These are companies that don't necessarily want to use more electricity for their operations. They're trying to use less electricity in, like efficiency, demand response, things like that. So they still have climate goals. So yes, they're going to use natural gas a lot of times, but they're trying to use renewables. They're trying to bring back nuclear power. Everyone knows Microsoft down in
I'd heard about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Down in Three
Three
Mile
Mile
Island.
Island.
Yeah.
Yep. Down in Harrisburg. And Microsoft also has what's called community first, which is if they think that they're increasing the cost of power for families, small business, hospitals, schools, they have committed to, hey, we're going to pay for those increases. Now, they just had a hearing on this a couple of weeks ago. The devil's in the details. It's not
Always.
yeah, exactly. So it's not totally worked out how this is all going to happen, but they realize they have a problem because people are pushing back on this.
Yeah.
This idea that these giant data centers with all this money, these big tech, is going to come in, use all this electricity, soar energy prices. A lot of data centers have already been failed, not approved because the people are pushing back.
I've heard,
So
yeah.
they know that this is a problem. Governor Pritzker out in Illinois just said you could lose your tax breaks if you don't come in with your own generation. You're going to lose your tax breaks here. So there is optimism around it, but it's an unpredictable thing. It's a moving thing. It's always in motion. What's going to happen? And people are making, in my opinion, what are these outlandish forecasts for this new electricity demand? The grid's going to be wrecked, and we're going to have all these problems. Just remember, a couple of years ago, everyone was worried about electric cars. That everyone's going to have electric cars, going to wreck the grid. I don't see it as a market wrecker. I see it as something that we have to deal with. And we do want data centers because it's a national security issue. China is building data centers underwater, under the ocean, for cooling purposes. So this is a national security issue. But I think they realize there's a problem on our hands. We're dealing with it. And I think there's actually a lot of optimism around it, but it's a forecast of what's going to happen. So nobody's wrong in predicting this doom and gloom because it hasn't not happened yet, if you understand what I mean. So
Yeah.
I see it as a positive, and I think there's a lot of optimism around data centers.
I'm curious about that. So if they're required to bring their own power with them, what are they doing? What are they generating?
A lot of it was building on site.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even on a rooftop, things like that now of a building. The problem with that is big tech, you need a lot of money to do that. You need a lot of space to do that.
Sure.
So as long as they can bring some and help alleviate this over-reliance on the grid, this over-reliance on natural gas, we should be in pretty decent shape. But I was just reading the other day, there's a farmer outside Pittsburgh. I think he's on the Pennsylvania border.
Mm-hmm.
He was offered $15 million, 86 years old, from somebody, I can't remember who it was, to build a data center on his farm.
He turned it down because
he turned it down. Now, I was talking to my wife about this, and we're like, they could have said, I'll give you 30. And they probably would have said, hey, here's 30 million. He probably could have doubled it. But, people stick to the morals, whatever. I'm not making a judgment on him, but they need land, obviously, too. And but a lot of it would be renewables on site. They're connecting to some gas pipelines. So there's going to be gas involved, but there's also going to be renewables, and there's also going to be nuclear to sort of alleviate that over dependence on natural gas, like we have seen in Pennsylvania. The last thing I'll say, and I'll hand it back to you. Pennsylvania now gets about 60 or 65% of its electricity from natural gas. If you go back to President Obama, it was closer to 15 or 20%. So we have really come to over depend on gas as a state because we're producing so much. Where a state like Texas, who's also producing so much, has a much more balanced power portfolio. They're using a lot of gas, but that level sort of stayed at 50% down in Texas for their generation coming from gas over the past 12 years. They're not over relying on gas like Pennsylvania is.
Interesting. Yeah, please, Cheryl.
Well, one thing I wanted to add, this isn't just a Pennsylvania concern. This actually affects the entire PJM, which is what, Jude, 11 states? 12? 13.
Yep.
13 states. So, while we consider this predominantly a Pennsylvania type issue or concern, what occurs here does affect 13 states. So
that makes sense. All of the states are all interconnected with their power grids, except for like Texas has their own.
Exactly.
So it's all that got them. But yeah. So anyway, so I'd love to shift gears a little bit slightly. I appreciate all this insight on the AI data centers. It's such an interesting topic. We could talk about this all day, but Moving on to the next question. So, what's one or two things operators can do to get a better handle on their energy use and cost?
Utilize a consultant. Us specifically. um, Knowing and pre-planning. As we've already kind of talked, that Bloomberg terminal gives us so much information, and it puts us in a position to be able to give very good advice to our clients for forward thinking. One of the worst things is when I have an operator or a client coming to me in November saying my contract ends in December. That would not be one of our currently managed clients. Our managed clients, we would have long since been working on their contract, but we never want to see somebody at the mercy of the market. That's really one of the toughest things. So really having your thumb on the pulse of what's going on, what we see future pricing to be, and offering sage advice based upon that, and then being proactive when you are given the information that now would be a good time. Now would be a good time to act.
Yeah, I imagine a month is not a lot of time to go over all that paperwork. I think back to high school and all the good work I did in the last minutes to write those 5-paragraph essays the day before, but I imagine it's a little more complicated with an energy contract.
You know what is? It's getting out a full RFP. We
Mm.
utilize 30 third-party suppliers here in the state of Pennsylvania. That's another reason why an individual, a company, an organization, let us do that RFP for you. How do you get your arms around 30 third-party suppliers who are all pricing differently with what they do or do not include in their contracts? So another pro plus for that.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. So, Jude, I have a question for you, sir. So, how does operating in different parts of PA, urban versus rural, or even national, change the energy conversation?
Just looking at urbanization rates, I mean, this is an urban dominated country. 90, we're 90% urbanized, 92% urbanized, whatever it is. Here in Pennsylvania, we're about 78%. So you take out Philadelphia. I'm in Pittsburgh, as I mentioned, in the city of Pittsburgh. Obviously, if you work the co-ops in the rural side of things, options there, it's harder to get, it's a little higher cost in rural areas, of course, a little harder access to get energy supply. And I think that's the big one. The reality is a lot of what you're getting, the policy being set because of some of these urbanization rates are set by the cities. And this has really been the case since, that's partly why prohibition was enacted, because it had to come in 1920 because the cities were going to get more power. So there was a push. If you're watching the Ken Burns, you can tell I've been watching Ken Burns Prohibition. It's a great documentary, but that was sort of like the cities have been gaining power, really since then. And I think that's part of it too, is just your policies set by or urbanized areas, if that makes sense. In the rural areas, it's harder to get access, and you're going to have more. You have aging infrastructure is another big problem. So we talk about new pipelines. Yeah, we need to build a bunch of new pipelines. We need to build transmission lines to bring renewables on. That's been hard, but it's hard to build pipelines. We need to build new pipelines. We need to replace the old pipe. A lot of our system was built in the 20s and 30s for natural gas. There's pipelines in Chicago that I want to say that have been around since the Civil War. So that's a whole nother thing we got to build. Is not just new stuff. We got to replace the old stuff that is actually dangerous, as everybody knows, especially for natural gas.
No, I love your dropping in the Ken Burns. I just got done finishing the Revolution one, but I hear you.
Oh,
Yeah, no, a lot of that stuff down in Philly. I mean, some of those pipes, like the water pipes, but those were all put in there during the Civil War and stuff. It is quite remarkable how much of this infrastructure. I mean, the Tennessee River Valley project, that was all the Great Depression. I mean, that was like the last biggest one down there, and that was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely some room for some upgrades there, I would imagine. Well, Cheryl, I have a question for you, ma'am. But other than price, what's a question an operator should be asking of their consultants?
How many third-party suppliers they utilize.
Okay.
That's really a very good one. Obviously, the more suppliers that you're utilizing, the better offer opportunities that you're going to have. Another huge advantage that we offer, this is a managed program. We don't just put you in a contract and then call you a few months before your contract's ready to expire. we're reviewing bills, doing bill auditing. We find billing errors. It's also taking a look and being able to tell an existing client what their current renewal price would be. There's many consultants out there. I know that I could pick up the phone, call the current supplier, incumbent supplier, and say, hey, what can you tell me that this client's renewal price is going to be? I realize they still have 14 months to fulfill on their contract, but we see the market dipping. So it really is a managed program. It's not just, all right, we're going to shop for you, put you into a good contract, and then forget about you. It's continual maintenance and management of that program.
It is a program. I like that. And like I say, I think managing risk is something. I want to go back to what you had said, is understanding energy costs and the volatility in it. That's a lot of it is the hedging strategies that we look at. It's sort of an insurance policy. Okay. It's something I want to make sure that, just because you pay a little more for gas in the wintertime, power in the wintertime, than the market ultimately proves out to be, maybe for a week or a month you paid more. It's an insurance policy. And we just saw the volatility during Fern, where Henry Hub is the spot price of Henry Hub went from $4 at the end of January. Within a matter of days, it went to $32. That's an eightfold difference. It's like going in to buy a car and they say it's going to be, $20,000 for a used car. And you walk in the next day and they say, I'm sorry, it's going to be $160,000. That's how you can equate this hedging to. That's a very critical concept, is putting on hedges and getting budget certainty is absolutely essential. We don't normally do 100%. You're not going to buy all your gas, all your power, but the idea is to get budget certainty, to know what your price is, because wintertime, we were smooth sailing. If you go back to first 2 weeks of January, everyone was, hey, winter's over. And Fern came out of nowhere, prices skyrocketed, all kinds. You get pipeline issues in winter, you get high demand, you get production issues. There's a variety of ways in which prices can skyrocket. And we saw that. I would argue there's not many more volatilely priced commodities out there than natural gas. A great fuel, but it is the Achilles heel of renewables. They're intermittent. The Achilles heel for renewables, or for natural gas, is the volatility in price. And we just saw that literally 3 weeks ago.
Makes sense. Yeah. $100,000 for a used car. I think I'll be taking the bus.
There you go.
Tossing that one out there a little bit. But while I got you, Drew, quick question though on the sustainability. We kind of danced around this a little bit. I want to ask a little bit. So when sustainability comes up, what are some realistic steps that people in the food and beverage industry can take?
We've worked with what you call RNG, like renewable natural gas, looking at nuclear options, looking at VPPAs, virtual power purchasing agreements, which is effectively linking to a company or industry in a facility in Pennsylvania. You can link and get renewable energy credits. You can do those, and you can link to a facility that's not necessarily directly in your area.
We work with partners in different areas of the state, because not everyone has accessibility. So we do work with partners when it comes. Just 2 weeks ago, I was working with a large client and introduced them to demand response or curtailment.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that led to one other thing called peak shaving, which is trying to, not to get into long technical information, but trying to curb your capacity tag assignment so that lowers your electricity contract rate in future years. So there's a variety of different options that we have out there and it's really client based. Quite frankly, there's not one size fits all. I have 2 clients right now that are considering on-site solar. So again, it all depends upon what some of their needs are.
Let me say this too, John and Cheryl. I don't know if you might want to cut this, but I personally think that natural gas is a sustainable fuel, and I think the industries have run from that. I know it's a fossil fuel, but I can make the argument that we've been reducing emissions, which to me is what sustainability is about. Are you cutting emissions? We've been cutting CO2 emissions in this country faster than any other country because of this shift from coal to natural gas. And I would also argue, as a side thing, maybe we don't want to use this, but oil and gas supply 75% of our energy in this country. If you go back to when Biden stepped in office, it was like 68%. So they've gained market share after the most climate conscious administration. I would argue, and if I was giving a speech and you asked me that question, John, in the summer, I would say oil and gas are sustainable because they're sustaining our way of life, that they generate 75% of the energy that we use. So I think, this, you could use a combination of what we're saying. But I think what Joe hit on, the general thinking is, you have to use renewables to be sustainable. When you think about sustainability, it's not just doing all you can to use renewable energy. It's about reducing emissions a lot of times. And I think there's a suite of options in that. And Cheryl hit on it with demand response, knowing when you can cut your operations, when you can shut down a facility, lower a facility's output at a certain time, type of thing. There's a lot of options to be sustainable. You can't just see it as a race to wind and solar. It's about reducing emissions.
Makes sense, because at different times of the day, the rates are different prices, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know years ago read this article about these people that were doing like the kinetic battery, where they were using the power when it was cheap to pump the water into the aquifer, basically, and then when the power was more expensive, they would run it out so that then they would then generate power. Just thought it was interesting. They were utilizing the times when it was cheaper to do that. Just interesting. But as we start to wrap up here a little bit, I do have a little bit of a lighthearted question for you guys. So, if energy markets had a soundtrack, what do you think that would be? I'm hoping it's not jazz, because that doesn't sound like a good way to run your power grid. Just toss that out there.
I'll go first. How about the electric slide?
Yeah.
Now you're talking. Now we're thinking. I like it.
Well, I would say GNR, welcome to the jungle. type of thing, which is getting more the volatility of it. And as we get into more exporting more of these things, natural gas especially, I'd say welcome to the jungle.
It's a good song. I was actually listening to it the other day. So what's one thing you'd want a Pennsylvania operator listening to this podcast to understand and take away from this conversation?
We are a data center hub, that we're going to see that this is a key state for data centers. And just remember how we've switched from coal to natural gas. So as I mentioned, gave you the numbers, 60% of our electricity coming from natural gas. That's all because of the Marcellus shale play producing more natural gas. We're now the second largest producer after Texas. And I do want you to realize that we are a little bit isolated from this, what we call the LNG export boom. We're going to be selling gas to the world. That's really come into the fray since 2016. And we're now the largest LNG exporter. But a lot of the build out, of course, is down in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's a little bit more locally sourced from Texas. So if you're an operator, if you have a facility in this area, you're a little bit isolated from that LNG export boom that is happening. And that's a little bit of an advantage. But if you have this new demand, whether it's data centers, whether it's exports for natural gas, it actually can incentivize new production. So just because you have new demand doesn't mean that's a bad thing. And we have seen demand go down, like in this previous summer that we just had, we were at record LNG exports and natural gas prices were coming down. So just because you have these high, exports, it doesn't mean the market's going to be wrecked. It's a little bit of how traders see the action. And sometimes they become bullish and prices go up, they go bearish, prices go down. Their positioning in the market just adds to the volatility because you never know how they're going to react to some of this stuff.
Interesting. So last question as we wrap up, guys. I want to just look into your crystal balls here a little bit and tell me what's the future look like for World Kinect? What can we look at? What can we expect down the road?
Well, we just continue to add to what it is that we do. Like I said, the desk help that we have from Jude and his team, that's really quite an amazing benefit to offer your members, let alone consulting services for all of that. One thing that we don't talk a lot about is our fuel division. Many of your operators do have on-site fuel. So that would be a great opportunity to reach out to us. Fuel's a little different. That's pretty much a dollars and cents type relationship. What's going to be my best price rather than strategy, which is what I would say that, this team here does. But that's really what we're looking at.
Okay. Well, this was a great conversation. A big thank you to Cheryl Heft and Jude Clementi from World Kinect for joining us and sharing practical insights on energy planning, risk protection, and margins in today's market. If you'd like to learn more about World Kinect and the solutions they offer, visit worldkinect.com. Thanks for listening to Shelf Confidence. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a colleague, and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. Until next time, I'm John Zimmerman, and this is Shelf Confidence.